I'm Lila, and I'm horizontal.
And I'm Mistress Leigh, and I'm cramped and horizontal with Lila.
Sex positive culture.
It's my body to give.
Are threesome gifts a thing?
Taking a breath.
I like your bed.
Horizontal.
This is Horizontal with Lila.
Are we buttery yet?
Do you feel buttery?
I always feel buttery.
In this episode of Horizontal, I lie down with Mistress Leigh, a professional dominatrix, fetish consultant, educator, and performer. I met Mistress Leigh through our mutual friend, the sex scientist, researcher, and educator, Dr. Shana. Mistress Leigh will be going on a BDSM tour in May 2017. Did you know that there was such a thing? You should probably find out about this on her website. Keep up with her kinky antics on leighentertainment.com. Leigh is spelled Leigh, entertainment.com. As well as being a pro-dom, she's an actress, a martial artist, and a general badass. She's full of characters and stories and charisma. This episode of Horizontal was recorded at Mistress Leigh's apartment in her little loft nook in another neighborhood in the land of Brooklyn. And before we recorded this episode, she fed me a 4-course meal, taking into account my dietary restrictions. Now, that's Southern hospitality. So hey, come lie down with us. My, what a long pillow you have.
Better to lay on you with, my dear.
Oh, yeah. We're in a really, really tiny loft, even tinier than mine, where Mistress Leigh pens up her.
What'd you call this? I know what I call it, but I'm curious as somebody coming in what they would kind of like observe it as. It's a fetish fantasy little play area above my kitchen, which is a very weird place to have a fetish fantasy place, in fairness.
It's a little alcove.
It is, but it doesn't feel like an adult treehouse.
That's what my place feels like.
Oh, that's great.
But I guess you have a little more treehouse vibe because actually your ceiling is made of floorboards.
Yeah.
And your ceiling is made of floors.
Isn't that cool?
Like Tigger, whose tops are made out of bottoms. And bottoms are made out of springs.
Kinky is what Tiggers do best. I do love the fact that I can put my feet on as we're laying here horizontally.
I'm too short.
Oh,
You're
a yoga instructor, right? You can lengthen and make it so touch the feet.
I can point my toes.
See, there you go. You got it.
Yeah. Well, so this is the perfect height for you to put your feet above your head, and
gets me into awesome and awful sexual positions.
You don't need a liberator here.
That's right. It takes all the pressure off the lower back.
No, you would actually still, in order to raise your hips. Oh, because you can push into your feet.
Yeah, it's like almost like down dog kind of situation.
That's really great.
Yeah, it's pretty dope.
That's nice. My ceiling is way too high for that.
Do you want to spend this entire podcast talking about my positions of my
well, at least the first part of it.
Okay, I'm down with that.
I just wanted to set the scene a little bit. Got a red blanket here. We've got some funnels that are plated with aluminum foil to look like cone boobs.
Yes, good call. They're my Madonna cone boobs. They're covered in aluminum. I did it in a session for a cross-dresser, and I put on Vogue and made him, Madonna-style Vogue. It's pretty great. So I keep them here to remind me of voguing and dancing and happiness and kink.
And in the corner we've got a muzzle, which looks a little scary to me.
It's a dog mask. It's a leather dog mask. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and then on top of that is they are padded leather dog paws.
They almost look like boxing gloves.
I know, right? It's a little confusing. Yeah, they're little puppy padded puppy paws.
So that's for puppies.
Yeah, it's from my little pets.
And then, are your toys hanging off of a dress?
So that is like It's like it's called a little black dress. It's like a little organizational tool. I'm a little obsessed with all things Container Store. So things that can hang off of things, inside of things, make me very happy.
Have you seen the Tumblr things that fit perfectly inside other things?
Oh, it's porn for me. I mean, I'm definitely on furniture porn. I'm definitely on Container Store porn. Yeah, it makes me happy in my vagina. So, yeah, those are all implements over there, and, various gags and whips and crops and canes. Crops and canes and whips, oh my.
Oh my. So, Mistress Leigh, you were recently profiled in Time Out, and I wanted to read it. It's very brief. I wanted to read it out loud and give you the chance in case you want to set the record straight about anything. Because I thought that, that might be the case. So, the whole feature is called This Is How They Do It. We pull back the curtains on 5 New Yorkers who are flourishing, and in one case, intentionally not, when it comes to sex in NYC. The dominatrix. Mistress Leigh, early 30s, Prospect Heights. Mistress Leigh doesn't mind blurring the lines between professional and personal. In fact, she sometimes brings her partner to work with her. A few weeks ago, I brought him into a session with an Italian couple that I see. She says of her squeeze, whom she's been with in a consensually non-monogamous relationship for 5 years and who also identifies as queer. I used him as my henchman for evil deeds with them, and it was hot and sexy and just so much fun. No session is the same for Leigh, LeighEntertainment.com.
Shameless self-promotion right there.
Well, they wrote it. It's not self-promotion.
Yeah, I'm sure I had nothing to do with
who plans to apply to a PhD program in sex research and also does data coding for the Casual Sex Project, casualsexproject.com.
Double plug.
Maybe the sessions have crossover interests or activities, but things never happen in the same way, she says. Lee's clients run the gamut from straight Caucasian men to mixed-race couples. Her longest client relationship is with a Jewish woman, and she's also done a lot of work with people who have physical impairments or are autistic. I've found that kink has been really great for helping people connect with their minds and bodies, she says. It can really help empower them. So is there a type of client she won't work with? I don't like to play with SAMs, which is what I call smart-ass masochist. You call them SAMs?
Sams, yeah.
SAMs.
I'm not that original. I didn't originate that. Someone else called them Sams.
I like more power play and for people to have more protocol and submission. She thinks of her service as a luxury item. I don't want to waste anyone's time or money, so we both have to be into it. And she has no time for the common misconception that cruelty is a facet of fetish workers. Everything I do is consensual, she says. If it's not consensual, it's not BDSM. So, I just had this thought that you might want to set the record straight on a few things. The thing about not mind, the very first line is you don't mind blurring the line between professional and personal. Mm-hmm. Is that true?
For bringing my main squeeze in to professional sessions. Yeah, that's fine. Yeah, professional domination is, fetish work. And I like to bring my squeeze in every now and again. And he's submissive to me, of course, and does what I tell him to do. With couples especially, is really fun. But, there's no sex involved in professional domination in the United States. Elsewhere, it's a little bit more of a blurry line. But here, it's pretty clear. And that would be one thing. The second thing on that, the interview, and they actually corrected this today, I saw, was I only session with high-functioning autistic folks. So, in other words, intellectual disabilities is only people who can consent, obviously.
Yes.
So think, people like Jim Jeffries are high-functioning autistic, and, the comic there. And every now and again, I really enjoy working with people who are physically disabled in some way. That's something I'm personally interested in and want to pursue in sex research as well when I go back into the world of academia. So, yeah.
It just makes it sound like you would blur the lines with your professional clients.
Yeah, it did read that way to me too. But listen, I don't really care what people think or don't think. Yeah, it's definitely the line is very clear. I don't have any sexual contact with my clients. It's all kinky good times had by all.
So,
But I bring him in. He does what I want him to do.
one of the things I was hoping you would do is give your definition of kinky.
Great question. You know, this is a toughie.
I know.
It really is, because it's predicated on norms and values, right? So what's kinky to one person is not going to be so kinky to another. And it's difficult to put a big old lasso around and pull down. I think for me, things that are kinky are, speaking from American kind of cis heteronormative perspective, which is all we got currently. I would say probably, things that cross over in fetishization, things that are activities that are outside of a quote unquote standard normal scenario, average scenario, in American culture. There are things that are kinky, oral sex is kinky in parts of South America, so that's just a different standard of like what's normal behavior, quote unquote normal behavior, when you meet up with someone. But some people, feet are kinky. Some people, ass is kinky. Some people, positions or activities or pain is kinky. I have too many fetishes and too many fetishes to like really give them what's kinky for me. I just know what I like, and that's a horrible answer. I'm well aware of how horrible that answer is. But the problem is that one of the things I want to do is to help normalize sexual behavior as long as it's consensual. So in my brain, I like to take the weird out of it all, because it's just things that people enjoy.
So you'd like to eradicate kinky?
Maybe.
Because kinky means
maybe
non-normative?
Maybe. It's highly possible. I used to say I wanted to, help get myself out of a job of being a dominatrix so that it's normalized and people can experience their sexual life in the way that, feels comfortable. So it's possible. But I think it's predicated on like these ideas that there's a very particular box in which that people behave sexually. And outside of that box is weird, exciting, bizarre behavior, aka kinky. But I really think that it varies from person to person, and some people will find one thing kinky and others will find it normal and boring, and it's difficult, these things.
So does it have to be outside of your comfort zone or outside of what you learned is okay?
Yeah, maybe. I guess holding on to like the way in which that you were raised and the culture in which you were raised to experience sexual energy in life, then maybe it'll always hold some kink for you. There are things, I think it's all sliding scale too, because there are things that I engage in now that, are not kinky to me at all. But maybe to another person they would be very kinky, if that makes sense.
Yeah, well, I think you're saying it's a spectrum.
It's a spectrum.
It's continuing.
You can say it better than I can. Absolutely. Yeah, it is. And it's always moving. Your lines are changing. Part of the fun, though, is to create this other than mentality, creating something weird and bizarre and strange. So out of one part of my mouth, I'm saying, yeah, I would love to normalize it. The other part of me is like, I like being a weirdo. You know what I mean? I like it when it's crazy and weird and wild and transgressive and deviant behavior. So maybe if we can celebrate the deviance in a normal way, then I want it to remain that way. I just don't want them to fuck with our sexual freedom, and our rights. So,
Yes.
yeah, that's kind of what I mean by normalizing behavior, is helping remove the shame and the guilt away from sex. It's pretty prevalent.
You mentioned the word fetish.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have a working definition of fetish?
Well, since the clinicians can't even fucking decide on it, I probably would be even worse on that. There's the idea that fetishization is, object-based, putting sexual value on an object outside of the body, But then you hear people say things like foot fetish.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but as I'm staring at my feet on this ceiling right now, the feet are just a part of a body. So you could just easily say ass fetish or breast fetish or arm fetish. I mean, people use these things, like, I guess maybe the term would be pejoratively, but a fetish being, in my world, the idea of fetish is, really relegated to activities, objects, materials, not so much, body parts, objectifying body parts. So I would say things like leather and latex, those are pretty go-tos on the standard.
But what is a fetish? Is it anything that turns you on? If we can't define these things for people, how will they learn?
It's a great question, because here's the problem. What you just said about, turning a person on. I mean, I have people that come to me that don't experience their fetish in a sexual way. You understand? So it's like, it's just something that they like. It's just something that they're, creates a click in their brain, an association. It really is an association. Overwhelmingly, it's sexual.
An association with what?
Sexuality, so if they smell the smell of leather, the feeling of latex creates, a sexual response of some sort.
But you just said that they
and
don't
some
experience
people,
it in
but
a
some
sexual
people
way.
don't. That's my point. Is this is very spectrumy. It's really tricky.
So then what do those people associate
the leather,
object or whatever it is
it
with?
triggers something in their brain, want for submission. So in other words, it's not a physical response of like a turn on, which is for most people what fetish is. But there's some people that don't experience that. I have some folks that are asexuals that are still fetishists. So it's tricky.
What does it do for them?
Maybe, I think the fulfillment, maybe for service, for worshiping my shoes or these kinds of things. It creates a feeling of like attachment, and, it connects them to something that they feel they want to be connected with. But overwhelmingly, it is sexual for most people. I really cringe to be like, it is this, because you always have these outliers that are...
Well, that's why I'm interested in a working definition that can always be tweaked and added to. So would you say that a fetish is a strong association with the fulfillment of a desire?
That's pretty fucking great. Let's go with that. Ding, ding, ding. We have a winner.
I almost knocked her
Side note,
photographs off the wall.
I think I have a fetish for your voice.
Ooh.
I'm not even joking about that. I saw you on Sunday, and I always hear you before I see you. And it's so true. And every time I get this like tingle in my ghibli bits, like when I hear the smooth caramel depth of your voice, I'm like, so I definitely have a fetish for your voice.
Ooh, I'm so delighted, and I hope millions of other people feel the same way.
I think that it's highly possible. I mean, these are I hate to be such a pain in the ass about this, but I try to be, if I can, as accurate as possible. And one of the things within the fetish and BDSM community is this idea of like, not boxing people in and like as soon as we say it's this way and 100% it has to be this way, then there's somebody comes along that does it a different way. And it's not, me being sort of evasive. It's that I really desire to be accurate.
I know that it's not you being flip.
It's annoying. I'm sure it's annoying.
But
I made my career off of
But the reason I start trying to grasp or
I love that you're putting two fingers like you're trying to like give a woman an orgasm. She's got her fingers in this like come hither hook.
Yes. The reason I try to grasp or hook something is because those who are already, they have their own working understanding of what it is, are not in need of this necessarily. Right. But those who are just hearing about it
for the first time,
wonder if, is my, longing to wear tiny hats a fetish, or is it just a style or something I enjoy? What makes
a fetish? Yeah, these are great questions, and I mean, if we had a psychotherapist in here, you would probably get a different answer.
Well, if I had 10 psychotherapists, I'd probably get 10 different answers.
Exactly. So I go back to what I originally said, which is if the clinicians can't define this shit, it's tricky.
But I don't want to resort to the definition of pornography. I don't know what it is, but I know it when I see it. It's not a definition, but the quote about pornography.
Yeah.
I don't want to resort to that because
I think we've been working on this very specific definition for a long time, and better people than I have tried and failed at it. But for so long it was in the diagnostic manual, and there was such a negative connotation to it. It was, as associated, with a dysfunction many times, from what I understand. But I mean, homosexuality was up until the early 70s as well. So it's like, from what I understand, again, I'm not a therapist, but what I understand, it's really about how it affects your life. And so people who now experience their fetish in a positive way, it adds to their life as opposed to sort of being a compulsion or whatever the case. I'll give you a concrete example of this sort of like potato issue.
Please.
So I was on a Kinky app and was, sort of discussing interests with a potential sub. And he said to me, Mistress, list the laundry list of these things. Mistress, these are my kinks. These are not my fetishes. And I was like, now this is interesting because in the U.S. we use the term interchangeably.
Oh.
Kink and fetish. And so I was like, can you unpack that for me? And in Europe, a fetish is something that you have to have in order to get off.
That's what I was going to ask. Because that is something that I think about when I hear the word fetish. Mm-hmm. It's something that is required, without which you cannot enjoy yourself sexually.
Right. So, and that would be an example in I guess, many parts of Europe. This guy was from Germany, which, they crazy anyways. I love them Germans.
Oh, yes. I spent some time in Berlin.
Oh, yeah. My peeps. Yeah. So for him, his, it really has a very specific connotation. In other words, it has almost like, seems a bit pathological to me. Maybe the old school kind of diagnostic manual version of like, I've got to, rub my, clit against a brown horseshoe or something. I don't fucking know, whatever. As they say, there's a kink for that, whatever it is.
Who says
a fetish
that?
For that. The collective thing. Like there's an app for that. There's a fetish for that.
There's a fetish for that.
But in my understanding of kink is like, and fetish is interchangeable, and certainly professionally here in the United States as a pro-dom, it's used interchangeably.
So how did he distinguish fetish?
He was saying that there are things that he enjoys, but he doesn't have to have them in order to orgasm or get off. Or
those
feel
are his
fulfilled.
Kinks?
Those are his kinks.
Ah.
Yeah. So,
they're non-negotiables.
I mean, they're negotiables, of course, but...
Sorry, the other way around, right?
The fetish would be, goes hand in hand with like, in other words, it's like, I have to have this in order to be fulfilled or sexually gratified.
And I would think of that as a non-negotiable.
Yeah, I guess
without this, I do not feel fulfilled or
At least
I
sexually.
cannot move forward without this thing.
Yeah. So again, I think that's the reason why it was in the manual for so long as, sort of a negative thing or dysfunction or pathology or something of that like, because there were people that were like, I have to see this stiletto in order to have a functioning erection or these kinds of things. So there's just a lot of debate and there's not enough research, which is why I'm going into it.
Good, we need you.
Yeah. So maybe talk to me in like 5 years and see if I've come up with a decent fucking answer.
Do another podcast in 5 years. I was wondering what you learned about sex growing up.
Wow, great question.
You told me that you grew up in Oklahoma.
I did. Yes, I did. Oklahoma. And
where the wind goes sweeping down the plain.
Yeah. You feel free to break out in song. I highly encourage it.
Very tempted.
I would enjoy it.
Except I think it would probably peak out the levels.
And Rogers and Hammerstein presents Fetish. No. Dun, dun, dun. The musical.
I have thought about
Fetish, the musical.
a musical.
Absolutely. I hope I can be somewhere in the chorus of your Fetish, the musical. Maybe like a huge stiletto just in the background for no reason. I'm just like in a stiletto costume dancing around for no reason. Okay, sorry. Sorry.
I just said the image is really.
I know it's
savoring
very clear.
The image. It's red, of course.
Obviously, I'm tapping my shoe. Clearly, of course it's red. Come on, you met me. Sorry. Oh God, where were we?
You were telling me about what you learned about sex growing up
Oklahoma. In Oklahoma.
Did you have sex ed?
I did not. Well, I did. Yeah, I did. I had sex ed from my mom. I didn't have it from my schooling. I went to a private Christian university and a private Christian school, and I was homeschooled. The trio. It's amazing. I'm not more fucked up than I am.
You were homeschooled until...
I was in a private school, and then until about like the middle 6th grade, and then my mother homeschooled us. She taught it at a university for nursing. My mother's a psychotherapist, so hopefully that explains a lot.
So, did she teach you a sex ed unit?
She taught me about sex ed when I was 5.
Tell me, how did she teach you?
Literally said all of it, all of the parts, all of the things. And my mother is amazing, and she was amazing and had the foresight. She didn't believe in sort of lying to us and hemming and hawing. She's like, this is the penis, this is the vagina, this is what it does, this is the pleasure, this, that, and
She told you about pleasure?
All of it, yeah. Yeah.
That is something I have not yet heard from anyone.
It feels good, and even though I was raised in a Christian home, I never remember my mother being like, don't have sex until you get married. I never remember that conversation. I just remember her wanting to empower us to be able to make our own choices about, our lives and our bodies and stuff. She's pretty progressive in a lot of ways. Yeah. Yeah, and she said something pretty amazing, too. When I told her I was becoming a pro-dom, I literally remember telling her, and she was like, okay, honey, watch your serotonin levels. I was like, wow, that's the most amazing advice anyone could ever give me.
Mistress Leigh's mom, you're incredible.
She's kind of amazing. Yeah, love you, Ma.
Okay, and she's practicing Christian?
Yeah, currently, yeah. I mean, always, currently. Yeah, she's a practicing Christian. She's very, very progressive and very kind and loving. And
but usually there's a lot of hellfire and damnation in the...
We didn't have that.
Premarital sex talk.
We never had the hellfire damnation. It's Oklahoma Christianity. It was really interlaced with a lot of like kind of native spirituality around the edges. And I only recognized that when I got out of it. Some of our best friends growing up were Muslim, and my grandmother was Shinto, and I'm Native as well. And so, it's not kind of the standard Christianity, you going to hell for this, then. Never had that. It was all love-based. Everything was very hippie love. Here's a good way to do things. This is probably a better way according to this. But, like, if you don't do it, like, you're still loved. It was you know, maybe what religion should be. I definitely think that it helped shape me. My mother and I disagree dramatically politically, but I always tell her, you know, you built this. You built this city on rock and roll. You know what I mean? You built this. Exactly.
I just have the desire to break into songs so often
I really
with you.
hope you do, because there's always a disco going on in my head 24/7.
Built this city on rock and roll. Built this city.
It's a great song. No, I think life should be a musical, for
And
sure.
then later on, when did you start exploring your own body?
It was later in life. It was definitely later in life. I was really pretty focused on performing, you know, dance and music and acting and athletics. So I've always been very. I think I experienced my sexual life through performing, through my body, like through dancing and through acting and all in the arts. Like that was really the first way. I was a late bloomer, you know, and I was very, you know, fascinated by spirituality and, you know, and I had this awesome mom that was just like, well, you know, you can just channel your sexual energy, you know, and so, you know.
She told you to channel your sexual energy?
Like, you know, if you feel, you know, like toward, you know, for her viewpoint was, you know, like, God built your life, God built your body, and like you can just channel that. So
She was talking to you about the second chakra?
I guess, yeah. She didn't have those terms for it, but yeah, she really felt that, you know, that nothing was ever. I think, you know what I think. My mother, she integrated the secular and the sacred. Like for her, everything is sacred. You know, everything is God made. You know, if you want to use that term, you know, so just finding a way to express it in the best way and the most healthy way. And, you know, she has particular ways in which she thinks that expression should be, but I never remember her condemning other people for their beliefs. And you know, my mother is a bit more universalist in her beliefs, you know, and she's kind of an amazing woman. Yeah. So, but, you know, we differ. I'm more of a science person. I tend to be, you know. I think she's more of a faith person, and I don't know that they're mutually exclusive, but you know, we diverge. When I'm like in the same way where I'm like I can't come up with the rock solid definition. I'm like I want science to be able to be accurate and give us some answers, but I'm sure they inform each other.
What was your parents' relationship like?
My parents, well, they're both remarried, and they were together like 26, 27 years. I don't remember how long, but they divorced. My dad is very submissive. My mother is very dominant. Apple not falling far from the tree situation.
That's what I was curious about, how their dynamic informed your relationships later on.
Absolutely, 100%.
So in this case, you emulated your mother's role?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, for sure. Because she's my, you know, hero. So she was like my first female dominant archetype. She was like, you know, that first person to me, the one who was like, had the career, had 3 kids within like 16 months. I have a twin and an older sister. Was super mom, full-time career psychotherapist, did all of the things, you know, always taking care of people, always, you know, making choices and financially managing and, you know, and running the show. And her mother was the same way. You know, I come from a long line of dominant women. They're just not as loud and obnoxious as I am. They do it with a certain amount of Southern charm, of which I don't always have. But
we are in a treehouse. There are people walking on the second level of the treehouse.
The treehouse. But that's not to say that my mother was the only influencer. I mean, I had amazing men in my life too. My dad is fantastic. I haven't spoken much about him. I love him tremendously. He's a really great guy.
Did he tell you
Japanese.
anything about sex and relationships growing up?
Not too much. He really came into his own when I was like 19 or 20. We didn't have too strong a relationship when we were younger. We went through a lot of shit. Our family went through a lot of shit. But I remember I came out to him first when I realized that I was queer. And I just remember him being like, well, honey, I just always wanted you to find, some guy or some girl that can just make you happy.
Oh.
It was really cute,
And were you clear on what?
That's probably
how
an
old were
exaggeration
you?
of his accent, but it is there, in fairness. I was definitely in my 20s. I was in my 20s before I realized that I was sexually attracted to women.
Okay.
Yeah.
And
I mean, Angelina Jolie, but like hashtag who isn't, Or at least in the 90s, every girl I know wanted some piece of that.
absolutely.
Right.
In what was that girl fight? What was that one that she did? No. Or she played
It was Hackers for
the
me.
badass mental
Girl Interrupted.
girl interrupted.
That correlation between crazy and sexy.
I don't usually have that, but
They say there's like a direct correlation between the amount of crazy and the amount of hotness that you have. It's like in direct proportion.
so you're in your mid-20s and you come out to your father, but you tell him, you use that word, you say queer, or did you say I think I like women or I'm bisexual?
I said bisexual at the time. Queer hadn't come into fashion. It's quite fashionable now to be queer. Queer.
Except with that accent.
I know.
Definitely not with that accent.
Definitely not with that accent. It's horrific. I will stick to my wheelhouse. Thank you very much.
Stick to your Oklahoma accent. I like that one.
I don't know what kind of My Fair Lady situation I was trying to muster there, but it was an epic fail. It was bisexual. I think I think even if it had been in fashion, my dad would have been like, "The fuck is queer?" Because I was not allowed to use that word growing up because that was offensive.
It's a derogatory
Yeah,
word.
it was at the time. Even though they weren't themselves on the front lines of the LGBTQ parade, my parents were always very respectful and would never let us speak ill. So when I first heard people start using queer in a positive light, I was like, this is awesome.
I think they're wrestling plastic bags up there.
It's highly possible. Bag wrestling of Brooklyn, New York. Anything's really possible in this building, in fairness. Yeah. But yeah, my family's awesome and they're very supportive. And I feel very fortunate, even though I did definitely different lifestyles. I think that if you're a good person, you can respectfully disagree. And in the current political climate that we find ourselves, I'm grateful that my parents taught me how to respectfully disagree.
They could teach a course for America.
Yeah.
Because we need it.
And just going back really quick, because this is great to talk about myself. Hashtag narcissism.
Don't hashtag yourself.
I know.
It's like don't shit on yourself. Don't hashtag yourself.
Don't hashtag myself. I have always appreciated the amazing men in my life. Like my grandfather was a huge influence for me. And to be honest, I have a little touch of the trans in me as well. And, have always really connected more to, from the normative perspective, more the masculine experience. I always felt like I've had more testosterone in my body and, sort of aggression and all that kind of stuff. And, and I cross-dressed. You can see that. Your listeners can see, but there's some of my hats over there. And
I do see some fedoras.
Yeah. Cross-dressing is really, really fun for me. It's a great way to express my inner man. And I enjoy, tapping into that. And it was the men in my life that taught me certain things like honor and respect and taking care of yourself and people around you that you care about. I also definitely feel that there's like a strong protector in me too. Like I do, have been known to do stupid things in the name of trying to protect people. But it's instinctual. It's not something to sort of, I think I'm going to be brave now. It's just like the adrenaline kicks in. It's very chemical based, where it's sort of like animalistic and raw, if that makes sense. So the masculine experience, well, my mother is definitely my hero. The masculine experience has been like a huge part of my life.
Does your inner man have a name?
He's got a few. I have a few different expressions of him. Maybe for a later date.
Oh, okay.
I have an inner misogynist. That's very interesting. And sometimes I enjoy presenting, even as a pro, as male. So I'm currently restarting the Dominant Women Submissive Men's group of an organization here in New York called TES.org. And they're the oldest BDSM organization that we know of. It's been going since the 70s. And so even though it is for dominant women and submissive men, all gender expressions are welcome. And so I enjoy, even pro-doming as male sometimes. That's like a personal enjoyment and passion of mine. So I've got a little, like I said, touch of the trans in me.
And when you say pro-dom, it's an abbreviation for professional dominatrix.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, my little jargon speak here. Yes, professional dominatrix. That is been my career.
How did you first come to realize that would be something you were interested in?
I'd been in the lifestyle community for a very long time, in and out of it, and
Lifestyle community.
The lifestyle fetish BDSM community, going to play parties and playing in my private life and these kinds of things. And
I want to go back to where that started.
Well, girl, you will not believe it. It really started in Oklahoma.
Tell me.
The crazy to hot, ratio we just discussed. I think there's a direct one, and I have no science behind this, but I hope to one day. The religious oppression to kink ratio is probably somewhere there.
Oh, yeah.
Right? I mean, it sounds good, at least, right?
Just the number of Hasidic men who use prostitutes or
dominatrixes.
cuddle workers and dominatrixes is so high.
Yep.
So even just in that small sample.
Yeah, definitely. I kicked my first pair of nuts when I was 15. So in my church parking lot. And there were several of them because it was a group of my athlete friends, guy friends that, it was like that height of the jackass era where guys were always doing stupid shit, being like, let's see who the bigger man is, just masochism left and right, doing things that are constantly painful. And, one of the things they wanted to do was see who could take a kick to the nuts, and my feet were readily available.
You volunteered.
I did, and the first time I did it, I got so wet. I got super turned on, and I thought there was something wrong with me. I didn't have any frame of reference for it. But as I grew, I realized I was a sadist, and there were really great ways to express that.
But that's a big glossing over from, this moment that you are in the parking lot, you kick someone, you get excited, and then you think there's something wrong with you.
Yeah.
But you don't tell anybody?
No, I mean, like I said, I've never been one to really sweat things too hard. I did think there was something like wrong with me, but it didn't sort of torment me maybe that it would for other people. Like I said, I had an intense teenagehood, so there were more prescient issues going on in my life. And I wasn't, having sex as a teenager, so I thought it was maybe just a one-off thing. And yeah, I did think there was something like, that was probably like a bad thing, that I was like turned on by hurting people.
And then what was the next time that you had an idea about that?
I don't remember. That was pretty the clearest moment because it was the first. But I've always been dominant emotionally and enjoyed bending people to my will, but in a way that was consensual. Like, in other words, I've always felt a surge of excitement and happiness when people trust me to do things. And I think that that's kind of a seed for being a dominant. It's because it's based in trust. So when I feel the responsibility to make good choices, and that's really what being a dominant is, making good choices for yourself and for someone else.
And the difference then would be that in a dominant relationship with someone, they're consenting to being bent to your will. And in a manipulative situation, they don't know, they're not aware, or they are not consenting to being bent to your will.
Right.
That's a very important distinction, I think, to make.
Exactly. And I think that, everyone sort of manipulates people in their own way, and there's subtle manipulations. There's, we're manipulated all the time. Like, every time we watch a romantic comedy, and we're like, manipulation is influence. There's ways to do it that are ethically sound, and there are ways to do it that are unethical and sociopathic. I hope that I'm the first and the latter, but I don't know. I really have always just loved that surge of power to make choices that are for the ultimate good of a group, to lead and to guide things and to know exactly what to do in a moment. So it started with, responsibility and then moved towards trust. When people are like, yeah, I trust this person to make great choices for my life, and to open up, new worlds for them to experience pleasure and joy and happiness. It makes me feel really good, and fulfilled. So
I have some submissive desires, but I like to, only recently did somebody point this out when I told them what I enjoy at a party. He said, "Oh yeah, you like to top from the bottom. I love women like that."
Oh yeah.
And because I am not interested in being someone's toy or doing only what they want to please them. It has to be something that is good in my body and pleases me. And so, topping from the bottom.
This is funny because I'm actually teaching a class on this through Tess. It's on March 15th, and the title of my class is called Ill Communication. And it's about breaking down the art and science of, these terms that we use, and understanding what percentage you are, because there's a difference between power play and fetishism, and there's a difference between position and power play.
Well, I want to hear about those differences.
Sure, yeah. Okay, so topping from the bottom is the idea that the person receiving the things, whether it's a spanking or maybe being fucked or whatever your particular receptive end of things, is calling the shots. So you're still making the choices, and there's definitely ways to be a dominant on the bottom. And just a side note, it's more acceptable for women to top from the bottom than it is for men. Like, for instance, I don't take clients that top from the bottom. Like, that's not something I'm interested in professionally, because I like it when they trust me to make the choices. Mm-hmm. But, this person saying to you, "Oh, that's hot," it really is sexy, because the idea is that for a lot of guys, like, delivering the whatever they may be, a flogging, a spanking, I don't know what kind of things you're into, but being on the receiving end of that, being in the quote-unquote bottom position, while still having you have your own agency and choices, can be a really sexy contrast.
And they know that I'm really enjoying it.
Yeah, exactly.
Right? So if it has to be a man who's not a sadist, because
not necessarily. So sadism is just the opposite of masochism. So masochism is the idea that you are physically turned on by receiving pain. Sadism is that you are physically turned on by giving pain. So, or energy. You can exchange pain for pleasure, sensation, energy. They're interchangeable. I'm a sadist, but It's all based upon consent, obviously.
But if you replace sensation,
Mm-hmm.
and you're referring to sensations that I find pleasurable, like the pinwheel and feathers and flowers and scratches and squeezes, I wouldn't call the person who gives that to me a sadist because they like to give me sensation.
Not necessarily. They could be service topping you, which is the opposite of being, an entitled power bottom, as my friend Blair says, or topping from the bottom. It means they're service topping you. So they could be a sadist, meaning they could be getting turned on by the idea of inflicting that energy or sensation to you. They don't have to be, but they could be. Or they could be service topping you, meaning whatever makes you happy is what I'm going to do. And in that way, they're still submissive because it's about you and your choices. Being submissive means that you are turned on by the idea of someone else making choices and serving them. That's really like kind of a very loose definition of it, but in a nutshell, that's what it means to be a submissive. Being a bottom is just a position. And so that's why I kind of distinguish between power play and position. Because you can be a top dominant, you could be a bottom dominant. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the power play can or cannot come into the factor there, and then you've got, of course, switches that the dynamic is going back and forth. And, I personally love wrestling, and, I train jiu-jitsu regularly. And so for me, I love not knowing who's going to win. That's great. I love truly wrestling people. And so that's a situation in which the top and the bottom position is not established at the beginning. It's who is more skilled will become the top or the bottom. So that's what I mean when there are all these outliers and fetishes. And yeah, my geeky brain definitely loves to minutia pick it apart.
I love it.
And thanks for giving me an outlet.
Even though my partner has watched BDSM porn, has played with me in such a way that I said, you're kinky, right? And at first he said, no, I'm not. And even though he's attended play parties with me and enjoyed some version of watching some folks engage in BDSM play, he still can't wrap his mind around the idea that BDSM can be healthy. What would you say to him?
I would say, what church did you go to? Just kidding. Because that's usually tied into some kind of either religious guilt or, maybe cultural negativity. I would say I would ask questions first, to be honest. I would say, why do you feel that way? Why do you think that it's not healthy? For instance, does he prescribe to the old guard of this is all pathology and is indicative of some sort of mental shortcoming or an illness of some sort? And if that's so, I think it would be really good to unpack that and dissect it and see what's left at the bottom. Because what's left at the bottom usually is a little bit of self-hatred in my experience. I always tell folks, if you don't want to wind up doing something, just stop thinking about it, either positively or negatively. In other words, if I have, for instance, a client that comes and says, I'm very interested in exploring things with you, Mistress. These are the things that are on the table for your discretion and pleasure to be enjoyed, to play with me with. These are things that I'm not interested in experiencing with you, right? Boundaries and these kinds of things. Then that's really a good, healthy way to express it. But every once in a while, you'll hear words like, I would never do that. Oh, no, I don't want to. I don't want to. I would never. Ew, gross. And you hear these sort of strong emotional responses negatively towards things, judgments, and these kinds of things. And to that, I always make a mental note of it because I'll be like, I'll see you in a year when we're doing that thing. Because the point of it is that you're building energy around it. Your brain has formed some kind of attachment and you're walking around in a circle, you know, and eventually whatever energy you have, negative energy, there's another side to it. There's an attraction there. You know, they say the opposite of love is not hate, it's apathy. So when people are kind of like, I'm not really into that, then I trust that more than, no, I would never.
That reminds me of an ex-boyfriend that I had. And I suggested that he go to therapy. And he said, absolutely not. And I said, why not? I've been to therapy. It was one of the most edifying and relieving and helpful, practically helpful experiences of my life. I went when I was in college because I could go for, I think about was maybe 6 or 8 sessions for free with a therapist who is at Tisch, at the art school at NYU. And he said, I said, why not? And he said, because I don't need it. And my hand went to my forehead, and I broke up with him about 8 months later, and he went to therapy.
Of course he did.
And he went to group therapy, and he started training for a marathon and lost 20 pounds. And finally started to speak about the trauma in his childhood, which he didn't tell me about until a few days after I broke up with him, which was storm clouding over our relationship. I started dating him because I was so excited that he loved the movie Secretary, and that he was dominant, and that he wanted that play, and that he had toys, and we, so it started off quite hot, and then he kind of stopped having sex with me.
Interesting.
And I said a few times, I said, hey, I'm not feeling good. I'm going to need some more touch in our relationship, and we need to talk about this. And I remember we had a fight about it while people were waiting for us to drive them home outside of an event.
Oh,
yeah,
that's a rough time to have a fight.
It was ill-timed, but I felt unseen and uncared for, and when I brought it up, he just closed down more. But that man doth protest too much thing.
Totally. Yeah.
I would never do that.
Yeah. It's the yin-yang concept, It's like 2 sides of the same coin. Love, hate, all these kinds of things. They all are connected to each other in some kind of way. Yeah. That sucks.
I hope he's doing okay.
We hope you're doing very well and that you enjoy your fetishes.
We hope you're doing so well. And may the fetishes be with you.
May all of the fetishes
May all of your
with
fetishes be with you.
And if you have a good definition, please send into horizontal
Lila@gmail.com. How did you learn to dom?
I think I've been practicing my whole life, to be honest. As far as the skill set, I'm a big old nerd, so when I'm interested in something, I tend to research the holy hell out of it, and I want to become the best at it, I obviously fail miserably, but it's the passion to become the best that keeps people curious, and I think curiosity is my greatest strength. I'm incredibly curious about life and fascinated by it. And I think that's the reason why I'm good at what I do, because I don't stop. And so I want to, find out, what about this? And could I do that? And I mean, this is one of the reasons why I come up here to my little fetish fantasy loft up here, is that, I have kind of two sides to my personality. One is very think German museum, very organized and clean and disciplined and, controlled. But then there's this other side that's wildly creative. And I like to be in environments, which is why I come up here to speak, to pique my curiosity and create associations, because that's what creativity is. And professional domination is all about association and creativity. Certainly there's a lot of improvisation into it. There's a skill set to be able to wield a flogger correctly. All those things, you can become quite skilled on an afternoon of YouTube binging. But the real art form is in communication and the brain. I listen, which is the difference between someone who's a good dominant and someone who's a bad dominant.
I noticed you have a pretty lovely little library up here.
I do.
Including Dita Von Teese's book.
Yes, absolutely.
Art of the Tease?
Art of the Tease, burlesque. Yeah, I definitely connect with burlesque as far as my styling goes. We have different archetypes as doms. I remember watching old black and white movies, Lauren Bacall, the long cigarette and the satin gown and the deep black and white, heavy saturation and the mystery and the smoky voice. And that's definitely one archetype. But then we have the playful and the funny. And I think with burlesque in particular, that's a big go-to for me, is that obviously I like to make people laugh. I mean, that's a big one, because laughter is the body's responding to
other
something.
orgasm.
Yeah, I like that. Laughter is the body's other orgasm.
The other orgasm.
It's true, right? Because it's kind of involuntary. When you find something funny, I mean, that's creative power. And I've definitely studied stand-up and different comics, and I study their performance and the way they do things, and have done a horrific stand-up on the amateur circuit here. Grotesque, really. But I did it. I was definitely afraid of it last year. And a friend of mine passed away very suddenly last year, and I promised myself I would start doing all the things that scared me. And I don't have too many of them, because I already kind of try to live my life,
Well, all the things that scared you that you wanted to do.
Yeah, of course, right. And not, insanity. But, I was deathly afraid of doing stand-up. So I was okay, I got to do this shit now. And I mean, it was like I'd say a bust, an absolute, I mean, people laugh, but in that sort of oh, it's the first time kind of way.
Oh.
But I did it, and I was really proud of myself. And so for me,
did you do dominatrix stand-up? Because
yeah,
that would be awesome.
I did. I actually did. And I'm thinking about jumping back into the circuit a little bit. I don't know why, and it's probably insulting to people who find it as their own personal path and career. But it did make me really happy, and it was super fun. So you got to do things that make you happy and that are fun. But yeah, so for me, the intersection of comedy and sexuality is so spot on, found in burlesque. It's great. Yeah, it can be fun and sexy, but my favorite burlesque is always really funny.
I never think of comedy as being a part of a dom session.
Oh, totally. Yeah, I'm really different like that than other doms. They sort of are very stoic, and they try to, keep the disciplinarian intact. And certainly I can take on that role if I feel the inclination in the moment. But my personality is definitely super fun and playful, and I like making people laugh, and I like making them cry, because it confuses their nervous system.
Oh, what a devilish laugh.
I know.
Very nice.
Yeah. Anybody can make somebody cry. It's very difficult to make them laugh, though.
Huh.
Yeah.
So you learned to dom through books?
I had some ladies that I, would apprentice under, in the moment for play parties. I definitely studied archetypes. Mistress Leigh, obviously, she's been a heroine of mine as well. Midori is a big heroine of mine. I'm so up her ass. She's in Japanese bondage. She wrote the book, and I am so hardcore fangirling of her, and she's amazing. A rope artist and shibari kimbaku. So I take as many classes as I can. I'm always taking classes, even though I've been doing this professionally for years and years. I always love to be in every class because I think it's, it's association, right? So everybody has their own creative mind and their own associations. I want to see what people are doing and what's happening. But, you could put me into like, somebody's kitchen and I can dom my way out of that. I always like to say I'm the MacGyver of BDSM.
Is there a custom where you receive a session as a submissive in order to learn how to dom better?
You mean as a professional, or do people do
that? As a professional.
Pro subs are the opposite of what I do. Professional submissives or professional switches. I think I've done maybe 5 switch sessions in my life. It's not really too much of an interest. And because I'm not submissive, it's pretty much a waste of someone's money, so I don't like to do that. I'm like, here, let me pass you on to my friend, or we can co-top her together. I like doing that kind of stuff. That's fun. But yeah, it used to be that the old guard people would start off as a submissive, and you would, move your way into dominance, and certainly that's kind of the 50 shades of horse shit that's floating around. But to be honest, I think that people should just do what they feel in their heart. I think it's... I definitely try sensations on myself so that I know how it feels, particularly when it comes to things that are sadistic and masochistic, to be able to understand what the person is feeling, physically. But to be a sub so you can be a better dom, I don't know. I don't know if I buy into it. I think it's important to have empathy and to understand physically what you're putting someone through, so that you can be smart about your choices. Yeah, my imagination is pretty far and wide, and so I can definitely put my brain in the submissive position to be able to understand the way that somebody thinks about their submission. I just don't have to do it myself. Says the control freak.
Have you witnessed any emotional, spiritual, mental breakthroughs in this play?
Have I witnessed any emotional
or spiritual or mental breakthroughs? People have breakthroughs.
God, all the time. It's more rare that they don't, actually. So it's not so much has it happened. It's like sometimes it doesn't happen. That's, to me, I'm being completely honest. It's catharsis. It's release. It's play. It's, yeah, absolutely, for sure. I'm surprised when it doesn't happen. Like, that's my go-to. It's my standard. And to be honest, I'm shooting for that. I think it should be transformative in some way. Why the hell not? You're giving your body and your mind over to somebody. And if they're good with it, they're going to take you to places that you've fantasized and dreamed about, but couldn't get there yourself. That's really connecting.
Is it cathartic because for most people who are kinky, they are somehow regaining control from some kind of trauma?
I think that's a kind of, could go back to the sort of old guard mentality we were discussing earlier, this idea of, and I hope I'm using the words here, but pathology. I don't necessarily kind of prescribe to that, and I don't think that there's enough science to confirm that, although I did miss the last sex science social because I was working there seeing a client, and so maybe there's some new research out there that I'm not aware of.
We'll have to ask Dr. Shana.
I think Dr. Shana would agree that there needs to be further science, is what I've heard from the bits and pieces.
Yes.
But there is this kind of idea that you should follow the yellow brick road back to the beginnings of your kink. And I think that that's like a big misnomer and like a strange perspective. Like, who gives a flying fuck where it came from? It's here. What are you going to do with it? You know what I mean? I did, hear this about the kink sex study, the idea that we can't here's the idea: we can't ever actually go back and figure out where a kink came from or a fetish, because that's predicated on the idea of experimentation, which is impossible, because then you would have to have controls and go back into utero and these kinds of things. So it will always be impossible to put a solid where did it come from mentality on there. We can probably make assumptions and maybe educated guesses, but even that feels shaky from at least the science that I've seen. She's the expert in this. Maybe one day I will be the expert too. That's my goal. But the idea of does it relate to trauma? I guess that it could, consciously, subconsciously, maybe you would have to talk to it by an individual basis. I don't feel that that's personally where it's coming from for me. It feels very healthy. It feels very happy. And I don't really have any sort of conscious associations personally. So I'm sure that there are people who, just like anything else, will use it to work through things. I don't know that that's a great perspective. I think that's a limited perspective. And certainly I have had clients that have expressed directly that every once in a while it's happened. Like, this was a memory that I had, and and they're trying to sort of play it out again. I try to steer them away from that, to be honest, because it's, number one, not terribly interesting for me. Being someone's record player, like, you could do this at home in your brain, masturbating. If we're doing something together, we're creating something together that's new. And I like for it to be new. I like it to be you and I in the moment, sharing and creating together. So I tend to steer people away from that if it's something that they are open to having feedback on. Obviously, I'm not in their brain, so I can't tell if there's sort of, majority people that are just like reliving a traumatizing experience over and over again. But I have to say, overwhelmingly, just anecdotally, I don't see that. I don't see it as the case as common. It's the exception rather than the rule for me. More oftentimes than not, people just come because they want to have a non-judgmental, fun environment to explore and try new things. And also, on a side note, somewhat, I'm a little bit of a drug dealer, because there are all these like little chemicals and drugs in our body that give us very happy feelings in our being. And, I'm just unleashing those drugs inside. The serotonin, the dopamine, all these neurotransmitters.
I don't think my boyfriend will be happy to hear that.
Being a drug dealer?
I'm considering editing that part out.
But what's wrong with that? People go to yoga because they want to have a certain experience. People laugh. That it releases the same chemicals. The idea of like, it's, we're getting addicted to, or I don't know what people would say, like, oh, you're doing this because it's just, you want to get those drugs. Yeah, but, sunshine is vitamin D. It makes us feel good. You can go as deep in the rabbit trail that you want to. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. As long as it doesn't interfere with your other parts of life. I mean, it's just like drugs or alcohol. Is it interfering in your life? Is it problematic? Is it causing issues? Are you neglecting responsibilities? I think the same should be taken for kink, right?
I agree with you.
Absolutely the same perspective. How is it affecting your life? Is it in a good space? Is it a good place? And if it's not, maybe you can work with somebody to get it in a better place.
You said that people experience catharsis and that you're often going for catharsis.
Yeah.
But what is catharsis but a moment of healing?
Sure. Yeah, a release.
But then you would need to be healing from something, wouldn't you?
I mean,
and
life is damaging, honey.
Everybody is.
I mean, I get healed when I think of my nephew's laughter after somebody's been a dickhead on the train. That's a moment of healing. Is there something deeply wrong with me? No, it's just a shitty moment. I think that life is kind of gives us opportunities of happiness and sadness all the time, and semantics, healing, whatever you want to call it. Happiness is joy, Unfortunately, we're always doing damage and we're always recovering from that damage.
Nobody escapes childhood unscathed.
Yeah. Or even a moment. Life is messy. Our cells are always breaking down, building up, then they're breaking down. Brain cells are dying. It's all this idea of things are always changing. It's the only thing that's constant in life is change. And I think that we should grab happiness and joy whenever we can.
How'd you learn about non-monogamy?
Well, I've always been attracted to a lot of different people. So I never wanted to just be with one person. Cannot ever remember being like, I want to be with somebody for the rest of my life. No.
Well, not in that voice.
Definitely not in that voice. I should probably outlaw a lot of these voices, in fairness, but yeah, I never had that sort of, I want to get married and be with one person. I've always found so many different types of people attractive, and people that maybe most folks wouldn't be attracted to. I'm definitely attracted to folks, that have quirks or have had challenges in their life and are interesting looking, interesting in their behavior. So because there are so many people that fit that description, I think I've always been attracted to a lot of people around me. And then when my sexual attraction caught up to my emotional and mental attraction, all bets were off.
I think it's beautiful. I also don't want to disparage anyone who, in earnest, wants to be with someone for the rest of their life.
No, not at all. It's admirable.
It was just
and
that
wonderful.
voice.
Oh, no, that wasn't a negative on monogamy voice. Not at all. Definitely not. No, I think that people should have the agency and happiness to do whatever feels right with them. I'm talking about for me personally, that's my voice. It's like, but who knows? Maybe I have some negative energy around that, huh?
Sounds like.
Maybe talk to me in 20 years and I'll be all booed up and be like, monogamy is the greatest thing in the world.
Who knows?
Who knows? That could happen.
The only constant is change,
That's
as you
it.
reminded us.
That's it. No, I think it's whatever a person feels inclined towards, whether even if they're asexual, like I mentioned before, I have some clients that are asexual as well, or monogamy or whatever works for you, whatever feels fucking great. Do that. Do that thing. It feels great. That's healthy and good for people too. Just don't be afraid to live your own life. I think that's the most important thing. And if the standard is polyamory in your world and you're a monogamous person, then live that great life.
I think the tricky thing for myself and a lot of people is not knowing what feels great.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Not being certain.
Well, my partner and I are emotionally monogamous. We're not polyamorous. We have fun and sexually we're open. I think sometimes it changes. The first 6 months we were together, we wanted to work on our relationship and to establish trust and build trust and get to know each other and just hang out. Also, I don't really have the emotional bandwidth for more than one person and their feefees.
Oh my God, I cannot believe you call feelings feefees.
They're feefees.
I feel so offended when you say that.
It's my inner misogynist. You can give him a name.
I hate him already.
He's
Jared.
awful. Ugh, no, he's more like a Chad. Just
No,
fucking
he's a
Chad.
Jared.
Jared. Gross.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's bad. No, but that's my point is we all have different things we feel comfortable with and it changes from time to time.
So you're not comfortable with romantically loving more than one person at a time?
I just don't even think I have the capacity. I have.
You don't think you're capable of it?
No, I have love, deep love for my friends, deep loyal love, but just it's actually the work of a relationship, like the emotional bandwidth, sort of
I do know
things. Yeah, we've talk about this. That's really it. That I don't have that capacity. I think he probably would. He probably would have more capacity for that. He has more patience for people than I do.
And would you want him to have that?
Sure, that makes him happy. Oh yeah, I'm totally down for that.
So you would be comfortable with an uneven but balanced equation of him being polyamorous and having other loving partners, and you being non-monogamous and having other sexual partners.
Well, I don't look at that as unequal. I just look at it as different.
I didn't say unequal.
You said, what is equal?
I said uneven.
Uneven. I don't see it as uneven, though. I just think it's different, you know what I mean? Because,
well, it's not even.
I don't know. I don't know. Maybe I don't see it in that way, I guess. It's just a different expression. To me, it is even because it doesn't feel imbalanced if that were to happen. He's pretty emotionally monogamous towards me. I just think that he probably could have more emotional bandwidth than I could to deal with relationships, the challenges, talking through things, boundaries, blah, blah, blah. All those things are a bit annoying to me, and I have so much kind of capacity, and then once my fucks have been given, they are no more. They do not have any more space in my world. But yeah, I don't know. Maybe it is uneven. Semantic situation. I don't really see it in that light. But
well, it reminds me of the first polyamorous guy I went out on a date with, and being single and in a secondary position does not work for me. That is one thing I'm very clear on. Yeah. It's not okay for me emotionally at all.
But some people do the non-hierarchy, right? Like the non-hierarchical polyamory.
Well, this person was extremely clear that his wife was the sun.
Oh, got it.
And all other women were the stars. Right? So he said, I would not be here if she didn't have a date tonight. If she didn't have something to do, I wouldn't spend time with you. She is always number one. She is my soulmate. So he was extremely hierarchical.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And he told me also the story of how they opened up, which was she is bisexual, but she is mostly interested in women. So maybe she's a 5 on the Kinsey scale, or a 4 or something. And they both seemed to feel that they were soulmates, right, enough to get married and build a life together. But she felt harmed by her longing to be with women. And so eventually they opened up their marriage just for her, unilaterally, so that she could sleep with women. And she felt a lot happier, and he felt a lot of happiness for her happiness or compersion, and he was able to enjoy that. But after a time, that started to wear on him, and he felt lonely because he also wasn't receiving as much physical affection as he wanted. And so then they opened. So it was open for her just with women, even though she also was interested in men. And they opened it up for him, but he's heterosexual. So he had a smorgasbord of women available to him. And also he's the kind of guy who women just follow him. If he enters a room, eyes go to him, and they just kind of throw themselves at his feet, which is something that I did when I was young and I met him. I was like 25 when I met him or something. It was before he was married. And then he went away, he went to India, and then, lost touch. And he got back in touch with me. I saw that he had gotten married, got back in touch with me about a year later, and I thought, oh, they must have gotten divorced. And what actually happened was they had opened up the relationship. And so he reached back out to me. And I knew that that wasn't really what I wanted, but I was so desirous of physical love, physical affection, sexual expression, that I would accept those crumbs, because that's how I really thought of it, was crumbs. And he came over one night, and that's the night that he made those boundaries so clear. And I said, oh, I don't think I can do that then. Because after we'd pulled around a little bit, had some oral sex, he left some marks on my neck, clawed me a bit, which was very sexy. But I said, oh, I'm a Libra, so the scales, right? I said, that seems really unfair. And he said, Lila, it doesn't have to be equal to be balanced. So I was reminded of that as you were saying. It doesn't feel unbalanced. It feels, and that worked for them for some time. And what they were really looking for was a third, to have a triad. And I definitely was not that person.
I think maybe I'm jumping, maybe I'm not, but when I hear those stories, like I think about things like things that pop up a lot to questions of when you're open relationships. You get asked about the ideas of jealousy and value, feeling like one person has more value or less value. And I don't know that that's the case in yours, but it kind of just jumped in my head when you were saying the whole idea of like scraps or crumbles or whatever, that kind of thing is. I'm in a world where we try to take the things that are and twist them and flip them and give them a little hat and put like leggings on them and stilettos, right? Or hosiery. So the things that are, you try to just kind of fuck with it a little bit. And one of those things is jealousy. And so I think that one of the greatest ways that people can experience like their lives is by using art and creativity. And for me, that's what kink does. It takes the things that are and it adds and it gives it meaning that it didn't have before. And it creates these associations that cause pleasure or that mean certain things. And I think a great way to deal sometimes, with things like that give us negative, sort of responses, is to flip them on their head and to grab back control, and by making them something that brings you pleasure. I'll give you a case in point. I used to have a client that was just smoking hot, very good looking, kind of like all-American type, great body, beautiful face, great smile, these kinds of things, dressed really well. And you would be like, whoa, that's a hot dude. And then within the first 10 seconds of him speaking, you would understand that he had a really difficult time with his sex life because he had a severe speech impediment. Severe. And so he would come to me for verbal humiliation. One of the great things that I love doing, and this is why I like working with people who have impairments, is that they include me into their empowering process. In our sort of cruel American world, undoubtedly he experienced a lot of being made fun of, bullying as a kid for this, impediment, and it became problematic, to speak to women and these kinds of things. But he decided to take that and to flip it and to make it something that, like, kind of like, fuck you, world. Like, not only am I going to rise above this, I'm going to take that thing that you thought was causing me drama and problems, and I'm going to make it my fetish. He turned it around so that it became something that caused him pleasure. And, his dick got hard as a result of me making fun of him for the speech impediment. That's an example of something that looks fucked up from the outside and problematic and like, oh, that's probably really like really traumatizing. But it wasn't. It was beautiful and laughable, and we kicked it and had a great time even after sessions. Sit around and talk, and it was a safe space where he could be like, this is my choice. This is what I want. That's not your choice. I'm not going to let you take that. This is my choice. This is my time. And I'm going to pay this woman to do it to me. So fuck you. That's the kind of idea of taking things that on the surface could be problematic, and making them work for you instead of against you. And I think that jealousy could do that too, or feelings of like, maybe, oh, I wouldn't be as important or whatever. Fetish is really great for like taking that and just amplifying it, throwing a spotlight on it, putting it out in the sun, out in the open, and then turning it into something that's really fun and sexy and playful.
I think that's a wonderful example. What are your boundaries when you work?
My boundaries, emotionally or mentally or physically?
Any boundaries?
I have a lot of them, actually. There's that German museum that's about to kick into play. My boundaries are written in thick black Sharpie. And
literally?
No,
or figuratively.
Meaning they're definite and they're very clear. I don't have sexual contact with my clients. It's not interesting for me. No shade on other sex workers. Love it. I regularly volunteer my time for sex worker rights issues, but it's not something that I'm interested in. And you'll find outside, as I said before, of the United States and different parts of the world, you'll see more crossover between sort of more intimate escorting and fetish, right? You'll see that, but not in the United States. It's a pretty clearly defined, line for us. So I like it. I always say you go to an escort to get your desires fulfilled. You come to me to get them denied. So that would be an example of sexual boundaries or physical boundaries. I think that for me personally, not just because that's the standard of American professional fetish work, or rather professional domination. Also, I just like it. I like not having my sexual body be in direct play. Like I think that it helps me as a dominant to be able to clearly steer the ship, because sexual contact is intimacy in some way. And I think that in some part of your energy, it can get a little murky on who's doming and who's subbing if you're sort of crossing professional boundaries, and it's monetary, so I don't know. I just think that it's just more tricky to maintain dominance when your sexual desire and experiences are in play in a scene for money. Does that make sense?
Of course.
So emotional boundaries are really important to me. As I said, my mother was like, watch your serotonin levels. It's really important for me to only do sessions that I enjoy. I don't, in the article, I don't enjoy playing with smart-ass masochists, people who are sort of not giving up their control. That's not a good fit for me, so I'll pass it on to another fetish worker. I don't play with people who are fucked up in the session, right? So like people who need to get drunk in order to play, don't do that. We talked about this earlier at dinner, of just sort of like sobriety being preferable. For me, play, it's very important, Somebody wants to have a drink or two around the edges to loosen them up, that's fine, but I don't ever session with people who are compromised. It's not up for debate for me. If they're not able to drive a car, they are not able to let me drive their body. That's another
Perfect.
one. And respect is very important to me. So before, during, and after a scene is very important. Boundaries, and also, there are certain fantasies that I am just not interested in. Like I wouldn't be a good fit. I don't have too many, but issues like that I feel like potentially could be someone playing out that, like what you were mentioning earlier, like, traumatizing experiences. If I sense that somebody is playing something out like that, I won't even really dress it because I'm not their fucking therapist, but I will tell them, listen, like, I'm a new person. Right, so maybe you've done this because every once in a while you'll have somebody will bring a script, like this is and then I'm this, and then you're this, and I always try to tell them, like, I'm a new person. I have my own creativity. You come to me because I'm an artist. This is what I do. Let me paint. You can give me the brushes. You can pass me the colors that are acceptable on this canvas, but I'm going to paint. Right? So that's something that's important to me. So if I feel that they're like playing something out that's unhealthy, I won't be a part of it. It just doesn't feel good. And it has to be enjoyable. If it's not enjoyable for me, it won't be enjoyable for them. Everybody knows when someone's passionate about their work. Everybody knows when someone's not. Even the greatest actor in the world, you can't hide the truth of that. So it has to be true. It has to be real. And something I enjoy, and because I'm not that great of an actor.
Do you ever get tired of sexual energy?
My own, or just others, or in general? The hand gesture was all things. I'm sure I do. And maybe I'm not terribly conscious of it. I think, though, that sexual energy is life energy. And I don't really get tired of life consciously. It's probably, but I can't really think of a time in my life where I was like, wow, I really need a break from sexual energy right now.
Well, you said that you were celibate for certain amounts of time.
Yeah, definitely.
That's taking a break from sexual energy.
Yeah, but not because I was tired of it. I did
Okay.
it with intention. I did it with
Well, it could be an intention to take a break because you're tired of it.
Yeah, it definitely
it's not
could
mutually
be
exclusive.
right, but in my case, it wasn't. So, for instance, it was just an experiment. Like, I wanted to see if I could just change my sexual energy into art and creativity, spirituality, these kinds of things. Yeah, it was dope. Yeah, I did, and it was really fun. I went on for a few years, actually. I kind of like things like that, like doing extreme things, for a few years and then like trying something else. It keeps it exciting stuff.
Mistress Leigh.
Yeah.
Will you tell me a story?
Oh, this is a story time I was warned of that I absolutely did not prepare for. Oh, Lord have mercy. Okay. Tell me a story, Mom. God, there's so many stories.
I bet.
Oh, and I've been telling all of them. Aren't you guys bored of me yet?
Nope.
I definitely proposed to my partner whilst tripping on mushrooms, so there's that. We're kind of hippie engaged. It's been that way for a couple of years. It was really beautiful. It's my first time tripping on mushrooms.
Okay, but that's not a story, right? That is a sentence.
I thought you'd appreciate my brevity since I'm so long-winded. Oh, God. All the stories.
Tell me something juicy.
Juicy sex stories.
Doesn't have to be sex. Could be something else. But tell me something juicy.
All the juicy, juicy. I'm better when someone gives me like a subject matter. My brain is like has access to too many files.
Okay.
I need a search engine.
All right, let's see. Let's see if I have anything for you. You ever broken up with a friend?
Oh, yeah. God, that sucks. Yeah. I tend to be more emotionally intimate and trusting of my friendships than of historically romance. Because I feel like if you don't have a friendship with someone, like romance comes and goes. I mean, it's there for stories and for music and the things that great films are made of. But for me, friendship, like, that's not a consolation prize. That's fucking high up there. I'm proud to call my partner my friend. That has a lot of value. So, yeah, I've definitely had to break up before. And that has sucked. It's pretty painful. How about when I was dumped? Is that more interesting?
Sure.
I had my best friend of many years ghost me. Just out of nowhere, just decide that she wanted to stop talking to me. And it was like probably one of the most painful things in my life. Because it was a lack of knowing. You know, if I had done anything wrong, we didn't have a fight, we didn't have an argument. There was nothing solidly I could put my finger on. And, you know, that was very, very painful.
I've had that experience too.
God, it sucks. I mean, I'm just sitting here reliving it and remembering, you know, those are the things that for me are very painful. Not like some fucking person that I had sex with a few times that, you know, ghosted, but the people that you've shared, you know, your experiences and your heart with, that just decide they don't need to be in your life anymore. And you don't have anything to sort of go off of, whether it's their issues or your issues. There's nothing that you can improve upon in your life. And I think that's why, one of the reasons why it's hard for people with my type of personality is I'm always trying to improve and become a better human. So when I don't have any feedback of what went wrong, my brain's just like stuck on, well, guess that's an unknowable. And it sucks. It really sucks. I hope she's great wherever she is and she's happy, but that's kind of a dick move. You know, some people are afraid of hurting your feelings, or they don't really know why they have to not have you in their life anymore. I appreciate it when they can at least vocalize that.
They're afraid to hurt your feelings and then they break your heart instead.
Yeah, man. It's like the most inconsiderate shit ever. Like, I don't want to hurt you. I just want to, like, casually fade away into the distance and not give you any information on why. That's not painful. It's, like, so selfish. But, you know, sometimes people do things that they have to do and you don't know why. And you just have to, like, give that up to the goddesses and say, all right, I guess the next go round I'll figure this shit out. Doesn't feel good. Yeah.
So that wasn't a story either.
That wasn't a story.
No.
God.
I think maybe I should give up on the story situation.
Well, it was. Did I have to give you her name?
No.
Yeah,
But
it was.
I mean, you didn't really, like, tell me the story of your friendship.
Oh, well, I didn't know you wanted all that. I mean, I can give you the beginning, middle, end, if that's what you'd like.
That's a story.
Yeah, sure, yeah. I mean, all right, I'll give you an example. Okay. We were best friends. She and I lived together in an intentional community in Oklahoma City. That was all based on hippie shit, love, happiness, you know, sharing space, figuring out what it means to, like, love in a friendship context, emotionally, you know, romantically and all that. And we were in this beautiful, great experiment for about 3 years and a lot of other people, and we were the closest to each other. We lived together, ran around, had the best time of our 20s together, shared a lot of hard life stuff. I think in some ways I probably was the dominant in that relationship too, and she was the more submissive type. But it was never sort of exploitative. It was like very much an honoring mentality, you know. She's definitely more meek than I was. She was deeply kind and beautiful and just gorgeous person, inside and out, fun to be with. And probably I was in love with her in a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
But we didn't have a sexual relationship. It was just extremely intimate and familial. And a few of us moved to New York, and I'd always kind of want to live in Brooklyn. And I was like, well, hell, let's go do this thing. So I did. And I guess that was sort of the beginning of the end. She had this kind of strange habit of always going back to her family. She's from a very conservative Indian family, not native. As she says, the dot, not the feather. Just super racist, by the way, but she said it. I didn't. And they, it's very common for people in her position who aren't married to go back with their family. I never really understood why, except that I think she feels a lot of like love and loyalty. Also maybe a cultural thing, but it just seemed like every time she went back to live with her family, someone would just lose contact with her and she'd fall off the face of the planet, and I watch her ghost other people. Never really thought that it would happen to me, but that's ignorance, certainly. If there's one thing that I've learned, it's to listen to watch people, because they'll always tell you exactly who they are. We just don't always want to believe it or listen to it or see it. But they're always telling. So, in retrospect, I should have seen it coming, that probably she would exit my life in the same manner. But denial is a very powerful emotion. Yeah, I miss her to this day. I miss her friendships. I miss our conversations. I think she probably just had to do what she had to do. And that did include me. So, is that sad enough?
The end.
The end.
I want you to take us out of the episode by saying,
That's what's horizontal.
I have huge appetite.
Horizontal's theme music was created by Alan Markley, Plastic Cannons on Instagram. To subscribe to Horizontal with Lila, for the show notes, the link to Mistress Leigh's website, and to topics we discuss in the episode, and all the other good stuff, head to horizontalwithlila.com. No ums.
No ums are allowed. Jesus Christ. Who's
Ums are not allowed.
Here? Maybe you're in the wrong field, my dear. Takes one and no one.